And we're live.
All righty.
I seem to have
Let's see.
Misplaced one of my lights.
Mine burnt out, so I'm working with one light too.
Okay, I'm going on Facebook. Okay, all right. Kick didn't work. Streaming to Kick didn't work. That was my first time trying to do that.
Oh.
Okay, I'm on so many places. We're on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Odyssey.
Oh wow! All at the same time through
Facebook,
StreamYard.
Twitter. I get most of my comments from Twitch.
You can stream to Twitter?
Yeah.
Oh man, I need to try that. Hi everybody. I don't know if I've ever been on that many platforms at once. Oh, my friend Emerald's here. Hey Emerald and JC Daedalus.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about psychology and whether or not it works.
It does work.
Doubtful. Or the only thing that I've seen actual study on was cognitive behavioral therapy. Which
I will say it depends on what you mean by psychology, but the psychology that I use works.
Okay. Why don't you tell us about what you do?
Well, I'm a certified peer counselor. I've been working in mental health for the last 8 years. Actually, before that, I worked for a year in inpatient psych, so I guess that's 9 years. And I help people manage their mental health symptoms. I have PTSD, so I work a lot with people that have trauma and PTSD and the reactions that come from it, managing that. I also have ADHD, autism. So we have the big emotions that we can use the same techniques to learn how to regulate and manage. So I've taken principles and methods and techniques drawn from psychology and applied them to my own self to help me manage my own symptoms and manifestations of conditions that are not even necessarily mental health, like autism, but the same principle applies. And I'm able to do that with other people that I work with and help them to learn to do this. So when I say it works, that's what I'm talking about. I see it in practice every day that I work with clients. And I've also seen it in inpatient. That was the really severe patients in psychosis, schizophrenic patients. I've seen patients come in completely psychotic, not in touch with reality at all, and be given a shot or a certain treatment of medication, like pills, for a few days, and completely clear up and able to have conversations just like you and I can, and be aware of where they are and their circumstances in reality again. So I've seen those kind of drastic recoveries through medication as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you mind if I ask you what you have PTSD from?
I have from several things. I have some a little bit of childhood trauma, but my main PTSD started. I watched my partner die in the hospital in the ICU in front of my face, and it completely destroyed me. I was never the same since. I had what they call acute stress reaction, and that developed into PTSD after. And it changes your brain. The hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the prefrontal ventromedial cortex. There's a whole circuit of your brain that's involved in PTSD and PTSD reactions. And so that's when all of that developed. Like before that happened, this was in 2007. I would get angry or emotional maybe once or twice a year. It took a lot to get me to that point. And after that, like 2 or 3 times a day, like all week long, just the tiniest little thing could set me off and get me to that same state very quickly, that hyperreactivity. That was one of the first manifestations of it that I noticed. And you had the intrusive memories, where the memories come back and like you react to something in the present day, but it'll call back the memories of the trauma, and your brain won't notice the difference. You'll have the same reaction all over again to just the tiniest little trigger in the present day.
So, has psychology techniques helped you alleviate those symptoms and get over it?
Yes. Well, the techniques that I use, and most of them were just kind of learned on my own from dealing with the condition, but they're drawn from psychology and psychological theory. Now, my very first major was pre-psychiatry, and I changed a lot of majors when I was in college, but I went in intended. I read Carl Jung, and I was inspired to go into psychiatry because he was a psychiatrist. So I've studied psychology formally and a little bit of psychiatry, but I can't necessarily connect anything I do with my formal psychological study. It's kind of ad hoc techniques that I developed from just having the condition and needing to manage it to function. And in the peer community, we learn different, because peer support is all about drawing from your own experience to help others. So I learned from other people with the same condition what's worked for them. So through all this sharing of kind of best practices and information, I've developed this body of techniques that either I've learned on my own and taught myself, or I've gotten from other people who it's worked for them. And that's kind of what I draw on the most. They're very experientially based. So what the exact connection to formal psychology is, I'm not completely sure, but they're based on psychological principles and psychological understanding and neuroscience too, like how the brain works mostly.
So, what are those techniques?
Well, one thing that helped me initially early on with the PTSD was just understanding what was happening physiologically when I was having a reaction. Because if you don't know what's going on, it's similar to a panic attack. They can be very scary. And if you don't understand that this is a particular physiological process, there's specific parts of the brain involved, specific chemicals. There's a chemical cycle. It has a beginning. It has a certain pattern to it. It has a duration and an end. Once I learned all of that, then I was able, when the reaction hit, I was able to be more aware of what to expect. And that itself alleviated a lot of the distress, just the education around what was going on in my brain and body when a reaction was happening. And then I was able to use that information to kind of guide and direct that reaction to get the duration shorter and the intensity lowered. A lot of it is, some of it is reframe, like our emotions. We're not just having a reaction to an event. There's also a narrative that it's being filtered through in our brain. Our brain packages things into stories. So if I'm triggered or experience a trigger, it's not the trigger itself. It's the way my brain is interpreting that trigger. So there are things you could do to kind of reframe or reperspectivize that narrative that things are being filtered through. And a lot of CBT involves that kind of stuff. Like one thing, now there are physiological techniques that help me, like cold water, because your sympathetic nervous system gets engaged, and you can use cold water, ice, some breathing, if works for a lot of people. Anything that can lower that sympathetic reaction and get it back to your parasympathetic baseline. But once I'm able to do that, because sometimes in the moment, even though you know what's going on, and even though you have the techniques, the reaction can be so overwhelming that you don't necessarily know how to use them in that moment. So if I can do something like splash cold water on my face or put some ice on the back of my neck or something like that, it can get my nervous system under control enough to start using the techniques. And then at that point, the first thing I usually do, I'm very aware just from experience that I'm reacting from a very narrow perspective. My brain has squished everything to like this one little keyhole that it's looking through. And once I can start bringing in other data and facts about the situation and start to bring in more possible ways of seeing the situation and widening out that perspective, that kind of creates a channel for those emotions to start dissipating and spreading out. Because when you're like coiled up reacting to like one particular interpretation, those emotions are very sharpened and they're directed to that one point. So once you can broaden that interpretation, the emotions have room to kind of spread out and kind of calm down, so they're not so like wired up and tense. So a lot of what I do is like start like, okay, what's really this is what I think is going on. What's really going on here? Let me think about this some more. Let me start noticing more about the event and the surroundings and the circumstances, bringing more data, because I can process more in that time because I'm not so in the grips of that sympathetic nervous system that the reaction produces initially.
You're an atheist, right?
I am a non-theistic Satanist. I was an atheist most of my adult life. I was raised Catholic, and I didn't even make my confirmation. So by the 7th grade, by the time I was like 12 years old, I had already drifted out of the Catholic Church and into atheism. And recently in 2019, just before COVID, I converted to non-theistic Satanism, which you could say is atheistic because it is non-theistic. But I consider it to be more than just mere atheism, which is what I was before that.
Do you participate in do they have like a community that you participate in?
They have the Satanic Temple, which is what I originally joined, but it's very woke, and I left it pretty early once I realized how social justicey it had become. And they have, or they had a satanic community in Seattle that I tried to hook up with in person, but then COVID hit and everything was put on lockdown. And then I moved out of Seattle. So I haven't been able to find one yet in person since I converted, but I have been looking for one. I just don't think there's as much of a community where I am now as there was in Seattle. And the one in Seattle was mostly the woke version. But I would love to find
one. Why did you leave Catholicism? Like your one main factor?
Science, 6th grade science class, junior high science class. I was an altar boy. I really enjoyed participating in the church. When I was little, I wanted to be a priest when I grew up. That was like my career ambition. And I had because Catholics don't just have the Bible, they have all these other extra books I had all those books, the novenas, the missals. I was a Catholic geek. I was really into it. But then when I started reading science, it just didn't, there was like a dissonance there that I couldn't resolve. And the more I looked at both of them, the more the scientific worldview started making more sense. So I just kind of naturally drifted out of it. I didn't have any religious trauma. I have really good memories of my time in the church and my experiences of being an altar boy and all of that. It didn't, I don't have negative experience of religion. It didn't scar me. It just kind of like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. It just stopped making sense and it got replaced with something that just made a little more sense to me.
The Catholic Church, they don't reject evolution, right?
I'm not sure.
I don't think they do.
At the time I was a kid, that wasn't anything on my radar.
It was just kind of like the scientific.
My three biggest barrier is the creation, like creationism, original sin, and the resurrection, like coming back from the dead. Those were the three things that really stuck out to me as contradicting with the scientific worldview.
Okay. What did your partner die from?
He had a really rare blood condition. It was autoimmune, where your body attacks itself, and his body was attacking his red blood cells, his white blood cells, and his platelets, all three blood cell types. And just as soon as his body could produce it, it was destroying them at the same time. And so he was just losing blood count rapidly, and over a course of like a few months. And it was really sudden. It came out of the blue, and the doctors kept telling us that there was hope. Like this is really rare, but people usually recover. So we didn't foresee that extreme of an outcome that quickly. So when it hit, it really took us all by surprise because we had been thinking that he would recover and come home.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, my story is that I have a child who was born with a birth defect, spina bifida, and she has a very rare condition on top of that, kind of as part of that, where she's like extra special, where if she gets upset, she forgets to breathe. It's part of having her brain stem kind of smushed. So she has problems breathing, swallowing, and kind of automatic systems like that. And so she has to consciously we had to consciously teach her how to swallow. So she needed a feeding tube for a while, but she's able to eat now that she's older. And when she got upset, she would forget to breathe. And so we would have to give her CPR. And they did, I don't, so in my like Facebook group for like spina bifida moms, somebody was doing like a research study. I think it was for their PhD thesis on PTSD in moms of medically complicated children. And this was like right before my daughter was born, so I wasn't in the study, but every single one of the moms had PTSD. And I'm like a weird exception, even with all of the trauma that I've gone through, having to give my child CPR and seeing her almost die multiple times. I don't have PTSD. And I think that's because I've kind of developed a like worldview that is very different from modern culture. Like I'm a lot like you. I think I'm autistic, but I haven't been diagnosed. I rejected religion because it didn't make sense like that. But I've able to come back to it. I was an atheist through my 20s. And then in my 30s, I came back to it. And I was like, there's so much goodness here in the teachings of Jesus. How can I understand this and not pretend to believe something that I just can't believe? Because I can't make myself believe something that doesn't make any sense. And just studying the Bible, and particularly the Gospels, that's mostly the words of Jesus, I was able to develop a theology that is in line with the teachings of Jesus and is also in line with what makes sense. So at least there's nothing that's contradictory. And I think that I'm really interested in evolutionary psychology. So we evolved in tribes, being outside most of the time, being around people, doing work to survive, and we evolved with religion. This is probably why the humans outcompeted the Neanderthals, because, and I think maybe people who are predisposed to autism or Asperger's have some of that Neanderthal DNA coming through. And so religion is basically there for a reason. And I think that in order to be an intelligent species, you kind of need religion to not go insane. Like we literally co-evolved with religion, and without it, we cannot be mentally well.
I found that with Satanism, and what you call religion, and we evolved religion, I call mythology. I think we're mythic creatures. We think and feel in stories and archetypes and that kind of stuff. So I relate religion to that, and I think, yes, I would say that's true. Like, we're not pure logical rational beings. We can't live on logic alone. There is a mythic side to us that, I mean, plenty of people survive as atheists. I think even if you look at their life, even if they're not conscious or aware of it or admit to it, there's still mythical elements you could find in their life. And so when I shifted to Satanism, it gave me a mythology. I mean, I've always been into Jung and archetypes and stuff like that, but the Satanist kind of gave me a single guiding mythology a framework that I could tie all of that together under. And having that is what keeps me, I think, from going back to just pure atheism. And so I think you're right in everything you just said. I don't think it necessarily has to be religion, but there's some kind of guiding myth that we each have or search for that gives our life meaning. And this was before, like, you had your religious transition back to religion before your daughter was born. And were all the moms in this group, this Facebook group, their PTSD happened before their children were born, or was it as a
Well,
result of?
after, yeah, as
Oh,
a result of that. And many of them are religious, and the population of spina bifida moms is largely religious because it's kind of a self-selecting group, because the vast majority of these babies are aborted. And so those who refuse to abort despite pressure from doctors are usually those who are very religious. But I find that modern Christianity is very different from the traditional form that you would find even more than 100 years ago. And one of the things that Christians generally believe now that wasn't necessarily true in the past was this belief that your actions don't matter in like the afterlife on judgment day, that you'll be judged purely based upon what you believe and not on what you do. In the past, the Catholic Church is more works based than Protestantism. And also this idea of God being like completely in control and God being good at the same time. Like our modern brains, like that doesn't really compute, right? And so we have this like God that loves us, but also allows bad things to happen, but he could prevent them if he chose to. And I'm not exactly sure how people dealt with that in the past. I think maybe their conception of God was less personal and more like natural, like more like the weather or something. And it really wasn't their place to question God. But now we've made God kind of more personal, and we have like a personal relationship with God. And so it kind of screws with people's heads when bad things happen. They tend to blame themselves, like why has God done this to me? But I believe that God is not all powerful at this time. And so if God could, he totally would want to make every baby born healthy, but he literally can't.
so is there a higher force or power than God, or is that just the ultimate limit of whatever power is in the universe?
He's basically trapped within his own creation. He's created something that even he is kind of like trapped within. um have you ever watched that show about the superheroes, and the super smart guy got caught on this planet that he created, the Watchmen?
Oh my god, I love the I just got through watching the HBO series is the one I've
Yeah, yeah,
watched.
yeah.
We just finished watching it like last week.
Kind of like
I've
that.
seen
Like
it 3 or 4 times.
he's trapped within. I mean, not that he
Dr. Manhattan.
like he did it on purpose. Oh, the other guy,
Oh, the what's his face? Jeremy Irons' character.
yeah,
Adrian Veidt.
right. So, but like he knew he was doing it and he wanted to do it, but he did it on purpose, and that's the situation we're in now. And basically that we are all pieces of God, and that God basically shattered himself, and so every human soul is another piece of God. And we have to become one again in order to become all powerful as one entity of God again. So it's like the singularity in the future, when like everyone who has chosen to become evil will be destroyed in hell, and everybody who has chosen to be good will become perfectly good, and we will all become one again. And then God will be all powerful, and we will live in perfect harmony again.
And was this the worldview that you believe protected you from PTSD,
Mhm.
or somehow buffered your mind against the trauma that these other
Mhm.
mothers experienced?
Yeah. And I can't imagine going through all that as an atheist if I had still been an atheist, because if death would be so scary, but it's not so scary now, because um we we will be born again. um I also believe in reincarnation. So like we live multiple lives until we achieve perfection, and basically what Catholics would call sainthood, and we're able to perform miracles. And then when we die, we become like angels. Um, or if you become completely evil, then when you die, you become a demon.
Fallen.
And so when you're like, so when babies die, they come back again.
So, well, that would make sense, because going back to what I said about emotion, emotion is filtered through a narrative. So if you didn't have a narrative to filter it through that would cause the amount of intense negative emotion that it would take to generate PTSD, then I could see some sense in that.
Mm-hmm. It's my responsibility to do the best that I can do. And it's a constant, over years of constant 24-hour stress, because I need to be ever vigilant of being ready to give my child CPR at any moment. And I cannot have a babysitter. I cannot even trust anybody except for someone who's like ER level experienced, because even like a regular nurse who hasn't worked in the ER will freeze up when it comes time to give CPR and not do it right. I have to be ever ready to give CPR. Sometime at the height of it, it was like 3 times a day, constantly.
Wow.
It's like especially doctor's appointments being very stressful, and just making everything in life very, very stressful, and having to deal with that constantly 24/7. And I've been able to deal with it without literally without any PTSD symptoms or anything. I don't have extreme anxiety. I don't have flashbacks. Like I can think back and to bad memories, and that's unpleasant, but I don't have intrusive thoughts. And I think there's also sort of stoicism philosophy in there too. And like thinking about, okay, what would happen if she died, and blah blah blah, like 1 2 3, think about it, imagining it happening. This would be okay, not ideal, but it would be okay, you know. um it doesn't matter, like imagining the worst thing happening to you, and it and accepting it, that eventually we're all going to die, and at the core of it you have to accept that. Because if you are fighting against reality, and because right now we really want to be immortal, we want the world to be perfect, and we really have that in us, and that's a good drive. But we have to know where we are right now in history, that we're not there yet. So do what we can to move humanity forward towards that. But for right now, accept we are where we are, and we can't, basically accepting what we can't change and changing what we can. And so it's just a radical acceptance that God has a plan for humanity, and our individual lives are, in the grand scheme of things, not that important. Like it's important, but it's not that important. It's not our only lives. We will come back again. We will have another chance.
Yeah. So you're saying you do this now, like
Mm-hmm.
having that broader perspective and the worst
Mm-hmm.
case scenario. Yeah, that's very similar to the techniques I use that help me manage my reactions when they hit. I do worst case scenario all the time in advance. If I think I'm going to go into a stressful situation, what's the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst case scenario in this? And then I plan for that, and that's probably not going to be the thing that actually happens. So I'm more prepared for whatever does. I do exactly stuff like that all the time. So I think intuitively we're drawing on similar insight into ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
I love reality. I reality test all the time, but I help other people test their reality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, all of that makes sense to me.
I feel like a lot of times, especially modern culture, we want to change the natural order of things. We want to pretend that things are different than what they are. but they are what they are. You know what I mean?
Our minds want, yes, our minds want that. And I think the experience I went through, like seeing death be a reality and a finality, kind of helped me. That really helped to sharpen that for me and drive it home. Um, because I haven't really, that's been my perspective ever since, and I haven't really wavered from it. And I had kind of the opposite experience because being an atheist, I wasn't religious at that time, and I didn't believe in an afterlife, and I still don't. I'm not sure I would have tried to join him. The impulse was very, very strong to want to be with him. And the only thing that stopped me is I knew how pointless that was because there was no anywhere to join him. There was no afterlife. So I was, Earth was the only place I had. I was stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
And so doing anything to myself to attempt to join him would have been futile in my framework at the time as an atheist. And so it kind of, my atheism is, I think, what kept me alive then and helped me get through the experience and overcome that impulse to join him in death.
Well, a lot. So Catholics have a very low rate of doing that because they believe that you'll go to hell. It's an evil act.
Mhm.
It's a sin.
Yeah, I remember that from growing up.
And so that belief is very protective in those instances where someone is tempted by that. And so a lot of atheists, when they're in extreme pain, they're like, well, I don't care. I just want the pain to stop. But, and so we see the rate of this happening, especially with young people, teenagers, is going up and up and up every year. And I think that this is because we've exchanged religion for pop psychology, which isn't scientific. There aren't scientific studies for any of it except for cognitive behavioral therapy, which there are some elements in some of what psychologists do, but it's really there really aren't good randomly controlled scientific studies for a lot of what the mental health industry does. And we've taken pop psychology and we've rejected religion, which is a tried and tested over a long period of time system of dealing with things. And in the past, people's lives were much harder than they are now. But they were able to deal with it and get through it and build a really good civilization that we get to benefit from now. And so I think that with science and the scientific method, like that's great and all, it's good for certain things. But when it comes to things like religion and culture and general, those soft sociology type
Mhm.
sciences, you you really you can't really like isolate things like that. Culture kind of comes in a package. And when something has been when something is traditional, it's traditional for a reason. That culture was passed down from generation to generation over a long period of time and didn't die out. So that means something. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like the best culture that's ever existed or that could exist. But when we look at societies and we go, what society would I most want to live in? And it's a modern, culturally Christian Western society. And I think that we owe a lot of what makes it a good place to live to Christianity. And the more we reject it for all of these new untested ideas, the more we're kind of breaking things and making things worse.
I would mostly agree. I think there's great value in religion for mental health reasons. Like it has mental health benefits. I have no problem with cultural Christianity or living in a culturally Christian society as long as they respect the beliefs of others, and that's kind of what we have now. So I have no problem with most of what you just said, and I do agree with the applicability of science, like the strict scientific method, to things like culture and mythology and religion and the even the social sciences.
Does
I'm
it
seeing
bother?
Daedalus is saying in the chat room, strength of mind given through religious beliefs is the goal clinical psychology wishes it could achieve. And that, yeah, strength of mind. That is exactly what I've learned to develop for myself and what I try to help other people learn to develop. And I would say that is one of the key goals of what I try to do with my mental health is developing that strength of mind, that resiliency. And when I say psychology, like the psychology I use, I don't necessarily mean clinical psychology because I work with a lot of clinical psychologists, and I don't necessarily. Oh, hey Jeff, Jeff's here driving but listening. I don't necessarily think that they. I need to be diplomatic. I don't have the highest respect for a lot of clinical psychologists just by virtue of the fact that they've gone to school and trained to become clinical psychologists. Like I would trust somebody with actual PTSD that knew what it was like to live with PTSD more than I would somebody that doesn't have it, has no clue about it, but has a PhD in like
Mhm.
textbook analysis of it. So I'm not necessarily talking about clinical psychology. I'm just talking about psychology broadly as the things we're able to observe and be aware of ourselves about our minds. And then he talks about Jacob's Ladder, which I did see. It's a very cool movie.
I'll have to check it out. So does it bother you that there aren't really a lot of good scientific studies on the mental health industry?
Not really, because I don't use studies. Studies I'm an outlier. I'm an outlier of outliers, and so studies usually capture the middle of the curve. So they almost never apply to me anyway, and nor do they apply to a lot of people I work with because I work with a lot of neurodivergent, autistic, weird, eccentric neurotypes, and so I take studies with a grain of salt. Like studies will give you a statistical norm or a likely outcome, but I go with what's actually happening in front of me. And a study is not going to address me and my individual circumstances or the individual circumstances and like makeup or profile of a particular client I might be working with. So I'm much better at just working with off of what's in front of me than what's been abstracted through a study. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole principle of peer support is we're able to help other people with similar conditions to we have because we have experienced it. We know what it's like and we know what works and doesn't work. We know what we do to manage our conditions so we can help other people or at least share it with them. It may be helpful to them. So it's a different kind of modality of working with clients than a clinician would. And the power relationship is different because we're both in the same boat from having the same condition. Whereas a psychologist is more one's the helper and one's the helped. And with peer support, it's more mutual and balanced.
Mm-hmm.
We're both on equal foot.
So with the people that you help, do you have cases where it just that you can't help them, it
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
work?
Well, yeah, and I'm only a peer counselor, so if there's certain levels of care, and if they're at a level of care beyond what I'm able to provide, I always like when I'm working with someone, it's not required, but I always encourage them, and I like to see them hooked up with a therapist or a psychiatrist, or I don't do any med work at all. So if they need anything medical, they're going to have a provider outside of me. So I'm only able to target certain domains and I'm only able to help them so much. Plus I work with a lot of when I was doing trauma work, I worked with a lot of people that were in crisis or freshly coming out of crisis. And I've shifted from that to working people that are more self-actualized and have done a lot of work on their own and just want to do additional personal growth type work. So I currently don't take on a lot of people that at a more higher level of care I tend to take on the people that are trying. They pretty much done the post-traumatic growth, and they're just trying to get to the next level of personal development. So it depends on, I'd say, the level of care or the care need of the person I'm working with. But I always try to make sure they're hooked up with at least one professional beyond me, preferably a team. I tell people all the time, add as many people to your team as you possibly can. You can never have too many people on your support team. And there's formal supports like psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, clinicians, healthcare workers, and there's your natural supports like your friends, your family, your church, your coworkers, your community. And so draw from all of that to build your support team. But that's what's been key in helping me more than anything else, is having the right support around me, like being very intentional of how I build my support network.
So could you so you see so you work with these clients and you see them improving? Do you work exclusively with people with PTSD, or
I used a large percentage, because it's just so common. Like a lot of mental health trauma shows up so frequently in mental health work. And when I started as a peer support, I started on a crisis line. Well, it was called the warm line, where you could call in and if you just needed to talk to someone. So a lot of trauma shows up there. So initially when I started as a peer counselor, I was just in the public mental health system. And so I got whatever clients came through there. And PTSD and trauma was, along with depression and anxiety, was probably the primary diagnosis. I shifted from that to, or not really shifted, but I focused in and specialized on autism and neurodivergence because that's what I have. So I'm better. There's not a lot of people that can work with that population. And to me, it's better if they can find an autistic therapist versus a neurotypical therapist, the chances of getting successful therapeutic outcomes from that are higher. And so when I started shifting to that work, it became less about trauma, maybe social trauma in a way, but not necessarily PTSD type trauma, and more about the issues that arise around neurodivergence and having particular forms of neurodivergence.
What is social trauma?
Social trauma is like maybe your childhood experiences, bullying at school, rejection, not fitting in. That like the kind of autistic people can get treated differently or not fully understood, and so people treat them differently in social situations, or they don't fully get included. Sometimes they're on the margins, or people will let them in so much or use them for their abilities, but not fully include them as people, and all of that can add up and take a toll on people. So it's finding the right environments where you can be your authentic self. You don't have to mask, and you can thrive and be successful around the right people, rather than trying to fit like the square peg in the round hole of neurotypicality.
My healthy daughter, who isn't disabled, I it must not be genetic because she's not autistic at all, and I am just amazed at how easy it is for her to make friends. There's constantly kids coming to the door wanting to play with her, and her experience in childhood is completely different from mine. And it is shocking because I think I just kind of thought that social rejection was very common part of life.
It
And
is for certain
actually,
people.
yeah, for certain people. And so I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But I'm glad that I was able to give my daughter whatever it was that caused it. She doesn't have it. And then my child who's in a wheelchair, she is so social. She makes friends with all of the kids. We were at the park and these kids asked her why she was in a wheelchair, and she was like, I have spina bifida. Now you know. Now we could be friends. And like they were like, oh, okay. I like just play like it's actually easy for her to make friends and play with other kids not being able to walk than it was for me.
Oh man. That's so
And
healthy though. She's destigmatizing it in the process too, in a very healthy way.
and I had I did not realize. I haven't gotten a formal diagnosis, but I basically diagnosed myself a few years ago because I'm like, wait a second.
What are some of the like markers you were using? So like social awareness or ability to pick up on cues?
Um, I started looking at the symptoms for autism in women. I went, oh, I have that, and I have that, and I have that. I have an auditory processing disorder.
Oh,
It's very hard for me to understand people with like accents or
oh,
anything background noise. I don't like loud noises. When I was a kid, I would freak out about the seams on my clothing. When I was a kid, I couldn't recognize my classmates' faces, and I had to memorize their names by their shoes because I could not recognize their faces, and I didn't understand how other people could. If someone got a new pair of shoes, I was lost,
oh,
and I had to wait for someone else to call them there by their name, and then I could figure out who they were, and things like that. So, once I like kind of clicked that in, I was like, oh yeah, definitely. I checked like all the boxes
that
without being so autistic that I literally couldn't function in society. I was still able to mostly pass.
mhm.
Yeah.
Good things.
I did the same exact thing. It was my therapist while I was in the military that helped me figure out my son was also diagnosed with autistic
Oh,
spectrum. Yeah, it's much more common in boys. I wonder if I had a boy, if he would have it, but I have girls.
because it presents differently. I understand. Like the diagnostic criteria are more based on male cases and geared toward males, and they say women mask. Like they learn to mask very early,
Mhm,
and so it's harder
mhm.
to detect. So it takes a special eye to pick up on it in
I've
girls.
always found relationships with other guys to be much easier. I've always thought that relationships with other women, there was a whole extra layer of social nuance that I just was not picking up on. But I always like hung out with the guys.
I'm the same
Um,
way.
be- and
Guys are so much easier.
I couldn't even deal with a workplace of women. Like a workplace full, there, it was just a matter of time till I got fired, and I was just completely confused the whole time. Like
Same
I did
here.
something on them, but I don't know what. Like I could tell when people are mad at me, but I don't know why, and they won't tell me. It's like just tell me, and they're like, well, you should be able to figure it out. I
No, we
can't read
can't.
your mind. I
We
don't know.
can't.
I don't
I've been
know.
fired 3 or 4 times from workplaces that were primarily female, and none of it
Yeah.
was for work before. It was all the social, like, they have all these invisible social rules that they use.
I've been fired for being too competent and making other people look bad.
Yeah.
And they actually said that to me. They're like, we're all going to lose our jobs because you're doing all the work. Get out of
Uh,
here.
yep, my
Um,
coworkers told me at one job that I was working at too high of a standard, and I was, like, making this standard harder for them to meet, and I'm like, "That's this is my normal working pay. This is my baseline. I don't have a lower setting that I'm working." And they said, "Well, it's making it harder for the rest of us."
mhm.
I don't know what to
Yeah.
do about that.
Yeah. I, I've learned to like consciously realize that there's social rules that, once you think about it, it's like, yeah, okay, I understand why they don't want a new person coming in working 10 times faster than them. I mean, this was typing. I was just typing. Like I was a speed typer, and these were older women who were like in their 40s, 50s, typing with single fingers.
You were showing
Obviously, I
them
was
up. That's
able
probably threatening.
to do all their work, and obviously they're going to get rid of me and make up a lie about me to get rid of me because they're all going to get fired and all their work going to be given to me. But like at the time, like I have such like a objective moral code that well, of course somebody wouldn't do that because that would be wrong. That wouldn't be good for the company. It's like most
Oh,
people don't care about what's good for the company or what's good for the stranger or anything. Meanwhile, I'm always concerned about what's good for everyone involved. And I was so naive, and I had to learn that people lie to me all the time. And I used to record my conversations with the doctors, and they were trying to push us into something that my daughter didn't need that would make them a lot of money. And I would ask them questions, and I'm listening back to the secret recordings, and I'm like, they lied here, they lied there, they're contradicting themselves. So there must be lying somewhere in here. This doesn't make any logical sense, but they're just trying to social pressure me into it. But I make my decisions completely based upon logic. So I'm like, well, I'm going to read every single study that I can find on this and learn all the terminology and come back to you with like all and do like a research report and like hand it to the doctor and be like, I did research. Meanwhile, he's thinking about how much money the hospital is going to make from doing this procedure compared to that procedure. And it's hard for me to even like wrap my head around somebody being that evil.
I
But
know, right?
people are that evil. They don't even think about it. They don't care that they're doing something that's going to harm the child but make the hospital more money, because their higher ups are telling them make more money, make more money. Um, and so that's been a sad thing to realize as an autistic people, that I can't trust people, and that not everyone is as good-hearted as I am.
I still think that way. I'm very naive and I'm very trusting and
Mhm.
very go. I don't have the theory of mind to be that cynical. And even though I know in the back of my mind that people are probably this and probably that, I can't interact with them as though that were true. I still have that.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like you might be a little better than even I am at picking up on and learning that, because I
Mhm.
get caught, I hit and run to those walls all the time.
Mhm. Yeah. Um,
You can learn to read people, and
yeah.
maybe I don't know if I've gotten any better at it.
Yeah, I've learned how to consciously read people. Yeah. Yeah, non-autistic people are very concerned about hierarchy. Hierarchy
Yes.
makes right. It does not matter how it affects anyone lower down. If someone at the top says so, that's the way it is. And I think that's evolutionarily advantageous for living in tribes. You cannot have a tribe stick together where everyone is questioning the leadership of the chief. You
Yes.
have to do what he says, and that's it. And I think maybe we have some Neanderthal DNA or something where we are just not tribal people.
I make my own tribes. Yep, I do too. Hierarchies exist, and I think a lot of neurotypical people are good at picking up, like reading the hierarchy and their position in it, better than we are. And I've done enough autistic groups to know one thing that shows up over and over and over is this lack of hierarchy. Like when you get a bunch of autistic people in a room together, they are just all interacting as individuals, and there's not a strong sense of hierarchy. And that's one consistent feature I've noticed about autistic groups across
Mm-hmm.
every group that I've participated in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm aware that hierarchies exist, that I'm not necessarily against hierarchies. I just don't know how to position myself in them.
Yes, especially when the person above me is less competent than me.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
if
yeah.
if they're more competent than me, then great. But if they're
Yeah.
not, I cannot just shut
I,
up and
nope.
do what I'm told.
Nope. I can't either. I don't know how. I don't know how normal people are doing it. Like I do not know how neurotypicals are doing it. Like even with the woke stuff, I have no idea why perfectly intelligent people that should know better are going along with stuff that is so obvious to me that is bullshit.
Mhm. Because most people make decisions based upon what everyone else is doing. So that old adage, if everybody else was jumping off a bridge, would you do it? And the answer is yeah, they
It probably,
probably would.
yeah, I don't have a herd instinct. I've said that so many times that like some people can. I had a friend. He said he was walking by a protest one time, and this wave just overtook him, and he had the urge to just join. He didn't even know what it was about, and he had the urge to just start joining in it. I don't have that.
Yeah,
I
I
have
don't
to
either.
understand like what is this about, and then I have to make a conscious decision to join in.
if I've ever find myself in a sports situation in the audience of a sports game, I get totally creeped out because everyone is hooping and hollering and they're all doing this like mind meld thing and they're like hypnotized with it. And I'm like, it's literally a person kicking a ball or whatever they're doing with the ball. This is completely meaningless to anything. Why would you get emotionally invested in this? You don't even know these people. Like,
They're
I
catching the
don't
wave.
understand it. Yeah. I disagree that Neanderthal DNA causes autism. I think the majority of sheeple are the Neanderthals, and only a small number of Homo sapiens exist as non-sheep. Um, mm, I think, well, it's just a theory. I'm not sure if I'm right, but I don't think you could say it's the other way around because people of Northern European descent that would have more Neanderthal DNA seem to be like the most individualistic societies compared to like Asians are very, very collectivist societies. Africans are very tribalistic societies. And they don't seem to have that kind of like um Northern European, I'm gonna do what I want. You can't tell me what to do. I mean, you just look at the sizes of the countries on a map from like back in the day, and they're just really small. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean, it could have nothing to do with Neanderthal DNA, but I think maybe because we had to deal with winter for such a long time that we were less tribal and more spread out and more in nuclear families instead of tribes of like 200 just because the land couldn't support that many people at once, especially during the winter. I don't know.
And I'm not familiar enough with the theory to even comment, so I don't know either.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's also the hunter theory that people who are autistic are predisposed to being like lone hunters.
I've heard of Aspie hunting. Like on the Aspie quiz, they have one of the characteristics is Aspie hunting, and they think that some of the detail we notice is based on our hunting patterns that are different from are very specialized in comparison with neurotypicals.
Yeah. Um
Because I'll do
yeah,
the
he
same
said
thing. I'll notice little details that nobody else notices, and I'll miss really obvious things that everybody around me can see.
mhm.
So my
I
attention
remember
pattern is very unique.
I remember when I was a babysitter, um the couple were like, "Oh yeah, we have this book somewhere." And they were like, "I don't know where it is." And I knew exactly where it is on their bookshelf.
You just spot it.
Because I remembered, "Oh yeah, I saw it was on your bookshelf on the third row, blah 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 blah." And they're like, how do you I'm like, I noticed where, which is also very overstimulating. It's very hard for me to go into a store because I notice each individual item. And it's very overstimulating. So I just do Walmart delivery.
Oh,
So
I
I
hate
do not
shopping.
have to go in there.
I get visual. I have a shopping limit. Like I have a window, and when I'm reaching, like I hate looking at a bunch of things. Like I get very visually overstimulated or overwhelmed. So if I have to look at too many things, my brain starts to shut down. And when I'm out shopping, I know when I'm reaching that point, and I have to. I'm at my window. I can look at 2 or 3 more things, and then that's about it. And then we're gonna have to leave. Try again another day. I've always
Hmm.
had this shopping window.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that like the internet and like being on your phone and iPads and stuff, for people with like ADHD and autism and stuff, I think it can be extra overstimulating for us. Everyone can get addicted to it, but maybe we're like more susceptible to it. And we are kind of like the early adopters for the internet. And so I think there is something there that we can't really handle all that stimulation as well.
I think it's both. I think it's a tool, and if we use it wisely, it can actually it
Hmm.
can enhance. I was a huge AOL chat addict back in the day.
Hmm.
Like 16 hours a day in the chair in front of the screen. And and it also, my whole social life improved and increased with the internet too. Like, as a tool for connecting with other people and finding other people like myself and being able to socialize, it has been invaluable.
I love to learn, and the internet is great for that. If I lived back in the day where I had to get my hands on a book, that would have been terrible. Back when books were expensive, or even back before. I mean, I probably would have become a nun so that I could study,
Oh,
right?
just
Back before the printing press, I would have just become a nun, I think.
it amazes me, like, especially the younger generation, like the 20 somethings. I'm meeting some that are so bright and intelligent, but they don't really read. They get it all from YouTube and watching YouTube videos and podcasts, but they have the brilliance of somebody that's read like a stack of books.
Yeah. Yep. I like to listen to audiobooks while I do things like cook and clean and drive and things like that. But I can't just watch like mindless TV and stuff like that like a lot of people do.
There's hardly anything on anymore. I find myself watching YouTube more and more. Like, instead of turning on TV, I'll go scroll through YouTube to find something interesting, because it's just crap now.
Yeah. Comfort blanket for people who already don't like socializing and who are overstimulated. The internet is more attractive to people who can't do overstimulation. Yeah. Like the going to a club is like the worst thing ever.
Oh, I hate it. Yeah. The
I
music
don't
is so
understand
loud.
it. You can't
You
understand
couldn't talk to
anybody.
people.
Yeah, how are you gonna have a
I can't
conversation?
dance.
One of my favorite things is to go to like a convention of for like a political convention and just like sit out on the pool patio and talk to people, and it's like nice and quiet and you can
Oh,
like have
yeah.
a conversation with just like one or two people, and that's like so much fun, and you just get like the nerdiest people who are really into politics and sit around and talk. I mean, that's why I like this podcast. Like, even if nobody watches it, it's still
Oh, my same thing. Nobody watches my stream either. I love doing it. Jeff read my mind because I was thinking the same thing. Like, this was supposed to be a debate. I don't
in
know, Jeff.
text
I
we
think
were
it's turning into
debating.
something better than a debate. We're having actual conversation and we're connecting.
Yeah. Yeah, I've only been to like 2 concerts, and like the last one was just because my
Yeah, I
husband
can't
wanted
go
to
because it's
go.
so loud. Like, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I've seen 2 or 3 in my life, and I had to take earplugs.
Yeah.
But,
We
and I'm
were
not
debating
sure.
over text though. We were
The,
arguing about studies and stuff.
we were.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember. Was it in the Discord or
Yeah.
in a one-on-one?
I ended up like walking away and then not reading it, and then it all got deleted, and I went, "Oh, well,
Oh,
it's
right.
gone
They
now."
delete
So
their
I guess
messages after a certain amount of time.
I was busy and I missed the whole thing. So
Emerald says she's loving this discussion. Oh, thank you.
Google source kung fu. I think we didn't even get into like studies and stuff because you were saying that you don't like studies, and I
I
don't
don't.
really like studies
It's
either.
not
I
that I
think
don't like them. They don't mean much to me personally in the work. I don't use them in anything I do. Like, if I were a research psychologist, they might mean something to me. But in my work as a peer counselor, I'm not a clinician. They don't really impact anything that I do. They don't help me manage my own PTSD any better or worse than not having them.
well, because they're really not very useful. I think that the scientific community has been really corrupted in the universities, and they're not really doing good science anymore, if they ever did in the social sciences.
Yeah, if they ever did.
I think that theoretically they could get their act together, but right now I don't think you can really rely on them to even having accurate studies. Like, they did the study where they gave the same data to different analyst teams and they all came up with different results, some of which were completely opposite. And it's like, well, if we can't even like like this is not good science. This is not coming up with good results. And I think our society is going in the wrong direction as far as mental health goes. But I wanted to ask you, why Satanism?
Because it's cool. That's the archetype I'm drawn to. He's the ultimate wild man. He's the ultimate dark father. He represents everything. I grew up during the Satanic Panic. Rock
Mhm.
music was satanic. That's my favorite type of music. Dungeons and Dragons was satanic. I was a huge Dungeons and Dragons nerd. I'm in the BDSM community. Everything that society stigmatizes is everything I'm into. So I'm like tailor made to be the black sheep of society, or the scapegoat, or the outsider, or the misfit, or the outcast. And so that's a role I've played my whole life. It's just, it speaks to me more than like I could easily use Christ or Christianity. Satan just resonates with me more, and ties together the themes that have shown up in my life more than others. I don't have a problem with the figure of Christ. I think as an archetype, um, there's a lot to be admired there.
Okay, what do you admire about Jesus?
Black Sabbath almost got me. I've actually never listened. I listened to one Black Sabbath album one time, and I don't even think I finished. I love Ozzy Osbourne though. I used to watch the Osbournes. Yeah, it's the style. It's an aesthetic and an ethos. Jesus was very unique. There was nobody like him before him. He transcended a lot of the petty human tribal bullshit that like evolutionary psychology that we're vulnerable to. Um, it's hard to like pinpoint a specific Jesus because he's spread out over the writings of other people, and they all kind of have their own version of him. And he taught in parables and enigmas and cryptic sayings. Kind of like Socrates, there was something, I don't know if I want to say spiritual or transcendent, but there was something other than what you get from an ordinary human that I think has had value to the culture. I get a very kind of comforting feeling when I contemplate the figure of Christ. Um, kind of a warm feeling, a little bit, but a very peaceful, calming feeling when I contemplate Christ. So I think for people that are looking for that, he would have great value. And we talked about Christianity earlier, and traditional Christianity, but there are several authors. Harold Bloom's one of them. Yes, he wrote this book back in the 90s called The American Religion, and he makes the case that Christianity in America as practiced today is drastically different from European Christianity or traditional Christianity as it's understood, and that it's closer to Gnosticism or has strong Gnostic elements to it. And one of the central features is this personal relationship that Americans have with Christ, and kind of this solitude that they experience with them and Christ alone together. And that is not something that shows up historically in Christianity or even in European Christianity today. And so it's kind of that personal connection or relation with Christ. But then I get that with Satan as well. Like you can have that with Zeus or whatever archetype is, like the Greeks had it with their gods, Aphrodite, Apollo. And so that's why I use the broader concept of mythology rather than religion, because it opens it up to multiple archetypes or multiple forms or manifestations of that mythological impulse. Yeah, the Viking gods, pagans have their gods. The Jews have Yahweh. They don't even have Christ, but they have their own religious figure. The Muslims have Allah, Muhammad, But I think there's like an underlying mythological pattern to all of it, regardless of what religious form it takes.
Okay. So, but you don't literally believe it's Satan.
No, I don't believe in anything metaphysical or supernatural.
And you said that you don't like the woke stuff, but the Satanist temple thing seems to be like specifically set up for the woke stuff.
Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time that I joined, but I didn't really realize what wokeness was at the time. That all happened during 2020 in George Floyd. And then I watched the Evergreen documentary, and that's when plus I lived in Seattle, and I saw the riots happen outside my window. Like I live 5 blocks from the Chaz, so all of that commotion was happening live.
Wow.
Put together with the George Floyd footage and the Evergreen documentary, and that's when I'm like, this has come from I used to be on the left. This has come from my own party, and this is messed up. What's going on here? And that's when I started. Plus, I got canceled a few times from some groups I was in over just having political opinions, and that had never happened to me before.
I got kicked out of an atheist group.
Make the light bulb go off.
Yeah, back in the day when I was an atheist, I got kicked out of the atheist group for being a libertarian.
What was this after the elevator gate scandal when atheism split into like it happened. I've watched wokeness divide the autism community, which went very woke, the Satanist community, the mental health community, the gay community. Every community I'm in, I've seen wokeness split it into 2 different factions.
And now it's happening to Christianity too.
Oh, they have woke Christianity now?
Yep.
I know it's happening in the Unitarian Church, but that was kind of one of the roots of wokeness to begin with. A lot of like D'Angelo's book was published from the publishing company that came out of, is it Unitarian? Universalist? Yeah, that side.
Yeah, it's spreading through the Christian community really fast.
Everything.
Yeah. You mentioned the Evergreen documentary. Are you talking about the one by Benjamin Boyce?
Yeah, Benjamin. Yeah, like 30-hour footage of. I watched the entire thing. I sat there just staring at my TV, like, how can this? Because I used to teach, and I've been to college, and I could not imagine. It was not so much the kids, but the administration and the faculty was buying into it, and then enabling this to continue. And the kids had they were giving the kids all this power. And I didn't understand, like the Brett Weinstein thing, where they're in front of his classroom, and he's like, "I want to have," he was saying dialectic or debate. You want to debate, and I want to have a dialectical discussion. They were just shouting him down. I couldn't imagine somebody doing that to me as a teacher, or me doing that to one of my teachers. That was a norm. To me, it's not even a norm, but that was so far from any norm I had experienced in that setting. And I'm like, this cannot be the future. This cannot be the direction society's going. I do not want a society where this is normal. And that's when I joined CTA, Critical Therapy Antidote, which is a organization of mental health professionals that were pushing, because it's making its way into the mental health field too, just like medicine, law, academia, the schools. And that's when I started finding other people that were experiencing the same thing and having the same, like looking around saying, this is not normal, right? This is messed up. And we were all coming together, the IDW people. That all happened during 2020.
Yeah. So what was it? So you were attracted to Satanism because of the style? I think
I watched that Hulu documentary, Hell Satan. And by the time the documentary was over, I'm like, those are my people. That is me. I need to find these people. I went on the Satanic Temple website that day. I joined. You just fill out a form, and it's free to join. I bought a bunch of T-shirts. Like, I got so into it. They had a little Satan shop like a block from my house in Seattle. This Gothic store that sold all these pentagrams, and they sold Satan horns and everything. I went and got all this Satan gear. I mean, there was like a lot of buildup because I was an atheist for so long. I finally had a religion, and I finally understood what it meant to have a religion, and it completely changed. Like, I thought I was going to be anti-Christian because that's what the Satanists were doing. It was against Christianity. And instead, I started to understand Christians better. I'm like, oh, now I get it. This is what it feels like to have a religion. And I got a whole new respect for religious people in general, for Christianity. All of my friends started to be Christian. And I'm like, this is great. Like, now I have a religion too. I have a spirituality. Now I can connect with all of these religious people that I'd been writing off my whole life as an atheist.
Mhm.
And so it took me in a completely different direction than I thought it would. But I'm very happy about the direction that it took me.
I fear that on the surface, they kind of pretend like it's just fun and games and they're just being rebels, you know, but there's something deeper that's true there, and that Satan is real and they really are worshiping him.
You believe that? Like we're
Mhm.
being duped. And
Yeah.
I mean, I am a rebel. I'm always going to be a rebel, whether I'm a Satanist or not. That's just the core part of.
Mhm.
Since kindergarten, I was like that.
Well,
But
if you were part of a society that was functioning well, I wonder if you would want to be a rebel.
that's a good point. I mean, there was nothing necessarily dysfunctional in my society. I was more advanced for my grade than the kids were. So it was like restless and bored. So I tended to be disruptive for that reason. I think if I had the appropriate level of challenge and something productive to direct my energies to, that rebellion could be channeled. But
Mhm.
they did a decent job with me. But I definitely had that rebellious impulse, like even as a
Mhm.
toddler from a very early age.
Mhm. Yeah. Um let's talk about abortion because it's so integral to Satanism. And I think it's connected to the mental health and everything.
Okay.
What's your opinion about abortion
Well,
and the
it's
satanic
changed as a
temple?
result of my political and religious transformation as well. My position normally is I'm not a woman, so I don't really have an opinion. I mean, I can give you an opinion, but I don't think it should necessarily count for anything because it's not even an issue I have to deal with. So I'd rather the people that it affects be the ones that weigh in on it. But my current position is that there are three stakeholders in a pregnancy. There's a mother, a father, and a potential child. And why does only the mother carry more? Like, why does her preference carry more weight than any of the other two stakeholders? Where's the father in all of this? And I'm starting to see the whole murder angle too, because I was, being scientifically minded, I was like, it's just a zygote, it's just an embryo. But I'm starting to see it from the perspective of this is a potential life.
Well,
And
it is a lie.
why would you want to end that when there are other, like, murder should be the last resort, or
Yeah.
should be, there's adoption. I understand there's reasons to maybe not take a pregnancy to full term for health reasons, and that can be evaluated on an individual case by case basis with a doctor. But outside of those circumstances, just because you don't want to carry a baby or it's convenient for you, there's not just you involved, and there are other options for the child than you having to be the one to raise it.
Mhm.
And so it started to seem really selfish. Like it started to seem like more of a really selfish decision. Whereas before, I didn't necessarily understand why people would want to have an abortion, but I thought it was cool that they could because personal freedom, and I'm not a woman, it's not my body.
Mhm.
But I started to kind of see it differently when I started to factor in the people that it affected outside of
Mhm.
just the mother, and started to see the child as more than just a embryo or zygote.
Yeah. When did you change your mind about that?
I'm not sure exactly. I started hanging out, like I didn't hang out with a lot of Republicans ever. My family was Republican growing up, but as an adult, I didn't. And I started hanging out with more people from the conservative side of the spectrum. So I started getting more input and different perspectives than what was in my own little bubble. So I think that might have started some of it. But I think probably the Roe, when not when they actually overturned it, but when we heard that there was a possibility that it was going to be overturned, and then the debate kicked up. I started reading all the different sides on social media, and the abortion side suddenly started making less sense. It just seemed to come from an ideological, political, really selfish space. Like, it's my body. I don't want people telling me what to do with my body. But it's not just your body. If it didn't affect another human life, and there wasn't also a father involved, then yes, maybe it's just your body. But in the case of a pregnancy, it's something more than just your body. And to see them arguing for it's my body, and diminish these other factors outside of it being just their body, it started to seem really selfish to me. It's your
Mhm.
body, but it's somebody else's potential life. And there's a father involved who may have a different vision for what he wants for that child than you do, but
Mhm.
your opinion automatically, because also got into men's rights, like the
Mhm.
MRA movement, and I got red pilled, and that's when I started working in men's mental health. And when I started hearing the male side of it and the men's issues, that factored into my
I had a friend in college, and he had a girlfriend that he had a very on again, off again, volatile relationship with. And one time they got into she got pregnant accidentally. They were gonna have the baby, but then they got into a fight, and she went and got an abortion to spite him.
see. I would have been that it's
Mhm.
that
Yeah. Um.
abortion does affect men. An ex told me
Mhm.
to get back. Oh, apparently this happened to Jeff. What? Bro, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
Or that she staged it. It's still that's what I'm talking about. Like, abortion is not a single person issue. It's not like getting a tattoo or even the trans. I don't care what people, if they want to mutilate their bodies, especially adults, fine. It's only your body. It only affects you. But abortion is not like that. Abortion doesn't just affect the woman.
Mhm.
It has consequences and implications beyond just that one individual.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Satanic Temple's um stance on abortion,
I
and
don't
how like their whole thing is basically religious freedom?
reproductive rights and abortion, and they try to use religious freedom or conscience as a reason, like, to get around abortion laws.
They say that they're sacrificing the baby to Satan, and on the surface they try to say that they're just saying that, but I think there's something deeper to it, especially when I saw like New York legalize abortion up until the moment of birth. We
That's
see
dumb.
California decriminalizing infanticide after birth, and these really extreme positions. And I can't help but thinking, like, when I was an atheist, I used to think that the Christian right were crazy with their slippery slope fallacy. Like, what slippery slope? No, it's fine. Let people do what they want, whatever. But then it's kind of such an extreme that I'm like, oh no, they were right. This is a spiritual warfare, and they want us to abort our babies at the womb, off ourselves, mutilate ourselves so that we destroy our fertility. Like, Satan wants to end humanity and hates humans. And so any lie, any trick that he could do to get us, because he doesn't have any power, he can only whisper in our ears and get us to do his bidding. And so whether it's the Satanic Temple or the Democrat Party or Antifa or any of these like anti-human organizations and ideas, like the idea that we're overpopulated and we need to decrease our population for the sake of the environment, and like all of these ideas, these are just lies of Satan trying to get us to destroy ourselves.
Well, I can see, seen from that mythological framework, right? would lead people to feel that way or think that way. I
Mhm.
don't believe in an actual Satan, but
Mhm.
I can see that people that do or work within a Christian framework where Satan is the enemy or
Yeah.
the anti-type. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, that's why I don't get all offended when people talk about this is satanic or pride is satanic or drag queen story hour is satanic. I don't get offended because I know what they mean by it.
Mhm. Yeah, whether you take it literally or not, there's something there, that there's very deeply
I,
something very uncomfortable about it, because we know that there's something very, very wrong
I
that's
think
going
our
to
yes,
harm ourselves.
our moral intuition kicks in for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to sexualizing children, like rebranding, destigmatizing pedophilia, lowering age of consent, which is all in queer theory. It's in their own writing. People can read it for themselves. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the abortion issue, yes, there's a moral intuition there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't even have kids and that stuff, but I'm never gonna have kids. I shouldn't even care, and it even bothers me. Like I've
Yeah.
spent so much time on Twitter fighting and arguing over this issue, and I ask myself, why am I even invested in this? But there's just something in me that it bothers.
Yeah. It bothers me when I see a distant cousin transitioning, and it's like, dude, like I want to like shake her father and be like, she's probably just being sexually harassed and abused, and that's why she wants to identify as a boy. Like it's this isn't something that's gonna help her in the long run. Like this isn't good. And the internet, and before that even the TV, like I'm wary of even the television. All these ideas can get streamed to us and our children so easily, and we really have to be careful, because ideas do have a big impact on us. And there's a lot of really harmful ideas that we collect, and it takes so much time to unravel it. And like you have to look up each idea and be like, are you good for me or bad for me? Okay, throw it away. Like another, are you good for me or bad for me? Nope, nope, you're hurting me, and throw it away. It's such a process because our brains are full with all of this junk that our modern culture has put in there. And like talking to 18-year-olds is trippy, man. They do not know anything and they think they know everything. And when you like are like, they don't even know the basic of male and female biology anymore. Like they think that you can literally be both gender, like both sexes, and change your sex, and they're so confused. And they don't know how to think clearly, and they've probably never even read a book. And it's very, very scary. I'm very
That's
concerned.
part of it right there. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can't read, how can you think?
Yeah. There's this book that's really, really good called, I'm I'm gonna get this wrong. Amusing Ourselves to Death, or Entertaining Ourselves to Death, something like that. And it's about how our minds, it's actually an older book. Um, how our minds are actually altered by television. And how like when we were reading, when everybody was reading and America was so literate, that that was really, really good for our brains and therefore for society. But when people stopped reading, whether it was the newspaper or books, and switched to television, it had a big effect. And it's, yeah, Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business by Neil Postman. And it's an older book. Like it's not even talking about like TikTok and stuff, which is just taking it to an even higher extreme. Where like how are you going to learn things from a 60-second video? Like it's literally rotting their brains.
Well, a functioning democracy depends on an educated populace. And so if our education, if we're going to get so dumbed down that we can't even keep democracy going, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Humans commit. Yeah, I believe in evil too. I've seen it. I've been around it. I've dated it. I definitely have seen evil exist, and it is in humans that I've seen it. Information is so easy now. And I think that that's that's double edged because there's a lot of benefits to that as well. It's a tool, and it's just using it wisely.
Yeah, it could be a really great thing if we used it wisely. And I try to strike that balance. I have parental controls on my phone and laptop, and my husband has the password, but like I told him to put it on. And then I have it's not a Kindle, but it's like a Kindle. And it's like a sheet of paper. I can't watch videos on it, and like maybe I could do some social media, but it would be really annoying because the page, it's like e-ink. It takes a really long time to like load anything. And so it's really good for reading. And I have like my Substack app on there. And I do my Substack reading, and I have a keyboard that I put it in and I write on there. I find it very hard to write on my laptop that I'm using now because there's so many other stimulating things. I can switch to YouTube so fast. So I have periods of the day that I'm able to access stimulating websites, and then the rest of the day I can't. And like I need this laptop so I can edit videos and do those types of things, but I also need time for sleeping and I need time for reading and for writing and for listening to podcasts and audiobooks while I do things around the house and just slowing down that dopamine drip. And I can't have willpower in the moment. Like I can't. Like that's not the way our brains work. If the stimulation is there, I will go for it. And so I have to actually block myself from being able to get it. Like I'm not gonna like go crazy like a drug addict and be like, give it to me now. I mean, if I told my husband like, hey, take it off, like he would take it off. But just making it a little bit harder for myself is that barrier to keep myself just automatically just going to the most stimulating thing. And
how do you manage that? Do you have a routine, or do you regiment your day?
Yeah, so Apple has like parental control. So there's like
so you use them yourself.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're called parental controls, but it's like it's called like downtime. And so there's a password on it, and I don't know the password. My husband knows it.
Oh,
and so if I want him to change it, I have to go get him.
So when it kicks you into downtime, then you're able to shift into
So at 11 o'clock I have a hard out because my laptop will shut down. My web browser will literally stop working.
Oh,
but that's what I have to do in order to get sleep, because I will stay up really, really late because I want to learn. I want to learn, and I don't want to go to sleep.
Oh, that's what I do. I go to sleep when my body wears out. Like I don't have a bedtime. I don't consciously try to sleep at a certain time because I know it's not going to work.
It's really healthy for you. But I think in the future that we will switch, that we will consciously be like, I don't want to have a device that will give me access to anything I ever want to look at any time of the day ever. I'll never get anything done. And I think we're going to realize that. And like the Orthodox Jews, they already do this. They have things called kosher phones that are like flip phones. So you could call people, you could text people like back in the old days, but you can't be exposing yourself to bad things. And they even have like kosher MP3 players that they will load up with rabbi approved podcasts and audiobooks and like sermons and materials. You could get like the Torah and all that stuff and not have like bad influences. And so they like, unlike the Amish, they're able to walk this line of using technology in a smart way without exposing themselves to all of the addictive things. I think eventually we are going to go in that direction, and people are going to voluntarily choose to buy devices that have those automatic stops in place.
Yeah, like we control our information space, ideally. Like I'm on the internet because this is where the people are. Like I'm an extrovert and I have to have contact with people, but I have very specific communities that I've curated for myself. And so I have my little niches that I stay in, and I guess that kind of helps me manage it and control my information space.
Mm-hmm. I find it very addictive, and I will the days will meld into each other, and I'll
I'm
get
still
nothing
living
done.
on lockdown, like the, just like COVID, where you're living out of your bedroom. One day is exactly like the other. Everything is online. I am still living that lifestyle. I have not transitioned out of it
Mhm.
to
I
the
think a
real
lot of
world.
people are the
I do
same
all my
way.
work online. I'm
Hmm.
still stuck in COVID mode.
Hmm. My husband now goes into the office 2 days a week, but a lot of people, they want to work from home.
Yeah,
They don't want
I
to
mean,
come
I
in.
love it. I'd like some real world connections and a real world, like a footprint in the real world, but I haven't developed that yet. Um, so
Yeah,
I'm just still doing this in the meantime.
I think we do need like a neo Amish. I like the Amish a lot. I really do. I don't think I could actually join them, but I kind of wish I could, because they're so, I think out of all of the religions that I've found, they're the ones that adhere to the teachings of Jesus the closest. And they're really smart for rejecting technology. Like, they've rejected a lot of things that would make their lives easier. And they have to work really, really hard. But they've also rejected a lot of things that have harmed us. And so they're kind of like a humanity time capsule. Like, if the system goes down, I'm going to Amish country.
I've seen Devil's Playground. They throw a mean party. Their Rumspringa. I'm from Louisiana, and I thought we knew how to party until I saw this Amish documentary, and I'm like, damn, they even have us beat. I think.
Well, they just go and see what it's like, and then they're
Yeah.
like, well, that's nice in the short term, and the long term it's actually pretty awful. And they go back and get married and have kids, and they're always like, oh yes, my days.
Yeah, some of them do. I like that they're exposed. It's kind of a rite of passage or initiation ritual, and they're exposed to the world that the Amish would give up, and they get to choose. They give them all the information, the full range of information, and
Hmm.
then they get to choose and decide
Yeah,
which path they want to take.
yeah. It has to be a choice, because if you coerce people into it, like the left is trying to do now, if you coerce people into it, they're not gonna be true followers. There's so many people that think that the left has gone insane, but they're scared to say anything. They don't actually believe in it.
I
They're
know. I
just
was talking
scared.
with that about with some friends today. Like they're saying the left is not a monolith, and there's plenty of people on the left, but nobody's saying that because I think they're all captured by
They're
this
scared.
fear. And I see the right all the time call out their extremists. Like all of my Republican friends will call out Nick
Hmm.
Fuentes and the Groypers and
Hmm.
the MAGAs
Hmm.
and disassociate themselves from that. But I don't see as much of that from the left. And
Yeah.
if you bring up controversial topics, they kind of just evade or avoid. Like they don't want to have those conversations.
Or the right is worse. Is just all
Yes,
they have to
there's this
say.
fear. I think there's a lot of Trump derangement, and there's a fear that of being associated with or contaminated by the right, so they stay on the left out of this. At least it's not the right.
Hmm. It's like they've given up Christianity and invented their own religion that's newer, and stupider and makes no sense and harms society, harms
It is.
themselves,
It is
and
definitely
it's just
stupid and makes no sense and it-
it's just
probably
a new
harmful.
religion. Hmm.
Well, it's harmful. I've seen, like we talked about, all these communities that are being split in half. So I've seen it have like actual social harm and
Hmm.
divide people. It's divided
Hmm.
me from my groups. I've watched it come between relationships and connections and close ties and community
Hmm.
ties. So it's definitely causing harm on that level.
Hmm.
I think it's causing ideological harm, whatever that is.
Hmm.
But people are believing or professing to believe some pretty crazy, unrealistic stuff right now.
Hmm. It's happened to the Libertarian Party,
Yeah, that's another one.
which was already so small and dysfunctional. And I was like, I'm just going to go to the Republican Party. At least they have a contact list. At least I can do something. And maybe I could help a candidate get through a primary and actually get elected instead of wasting my time in the Libertarian Party where you don't really have a chance. And now they're fighting over, you know, something that seems so obvious, but yet people are, and it's almost like silly that we're even having the debate about trans kids. Like, how is this even a debate?
I stopped caring. I decided the kids can do what they want. If they want to fuck up their bodies, and the parents let them in the school, then I just do it. I don't care anymore. It's not my kids.
I kind of want, well, what ideally is I want to separate from these people. I don't want to be in the same government as
Oh, I
them.
can't. No, I can barely be on social media with them. I definitely don't
Mhm.
want to be in real life with
Governed by them. Yeah. I don't want to be paying for their social their medical care. I don't want to be paying for children to get puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and surgeries and whatever. I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to approve of it. I don't want my
No,
kids
I don't
going to
think it
school
should
with
be
your kids.
Medicaid funded.
I don't want to have anything to do with it. If you want to do that, I'm not going to send an army to come kidnap your kids and stop you from doing it. But I want absolutely nothing to do. I don't want to go to the same hospitals or doctors. I want to completely boycott anybody that is advocating for it or encouraging it or participating in any sort of sex change for children at all. And that's not even our right now. Like right now, our taxes go to pay for health insurance for
Mhm.
these kids to be getting these treatments.
Yeah.
Um, and it's absolutely disgusting. And I would rather see the government shut down and stop existing than to see this because I don't want to participate in evil.
Daedalus sums up the left pretty well. He said they're pussies and full of people who hate confrontation. I found that to be true by adopting passive aggression and violent obedience and gaslight. Yes, 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 yes to all of that. I'm up here in Seattle. Like Seattle in the Pacific Northwest is like woke central, and that is exactly how they act up here. It's passive aggressive, very avoidant, conflict avoidant, confrontation avoidant, and everything's collectivist and like they put their finger in the wind to see what everybody else is thinking and doing.
Mhm. Yeah. It's like toxic femininity gone amok.
Yes,
It's like
yeah.
it's like the worst traits of women and just taken to like an extreme. Um and like it's really not good. I'm actually working on a video about comparing Antifa and the violent left to the faith militant from Game of Thrones. And I get into all of like these tactics, even though the faith militant were
I haven't seen
religious,
Game of
right?
Thrones, so is that a
Oh,
okay?
it's oh, spoiler alert. I don't know if you ever plan on watching it,
I don't
but
know.
they are a religious cult, fanatical religious cult that kind of springs up during this Civil War thing, and they are very violent and have tactics that are very similar to Antifa. And so I hadn't watched it in years, but I kept thinking about the faith militant, you know? And even though their goal, like they were like shutting down the brothels and the taverns and like holding people, like arresting gay people and stuff like that. So it's like right leaning, but the tactics were like exactly the same. And you might have heard of a shame, 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 ding, ding, ding.
No, but that's what they do. Like
Right? Yeah. So
shame and guilt. They try to
yeah,
exploit the emotions of shame and guilt, and
yeah,
compassion and empathy.
yeah. Public shaming. Like I'm watching the scene of the public shaming, where someone is made to walk naked through the streets while they yell shame and like hurl insults. And I can't help but think about like these Karen videos, like City Bike Karen. Like they just, like, this poor woman, she was completely innocent, and they just excoriated her. They wanted her fired. They want to ruin this woman's life because of a edited, clipped video of her where she was the victim of basically being mugged. And like it's like the same exact thing. The
Yeah,
public
it's the
shaming.
rise of the Karens. That's exactly what this is.
Mm-hmm. Like any woman that doesn't totally just be like, okay, whatever you want to a black person, is evil. But like they're looking so hard for racism and they can't find it,
Because
so they
there's not, because
invent
we
these
made so much
situations.
progress. They need to get out their
Mhm.
microscope and find the little tiny little bit that's left in certain little isolated pockets or individuals and magnify that into a global crisis.
Mhm. Yeah. They need to keep it going, like, and like the fake Nazis,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
everybody's like, those are just feds. Like these are not
well,
these
everything's
are
a
not
Nazi now.
real.
I've been called Nazi. I'm a racist. I'm a white. Even gay people now, like gay men that now that we got marriage, are cis gay white males, and we're thrown in with the patriarchy now. We're like 6 7 years ago, we were the oppressed that were being denied our civil rights. It
Well,
switched that quickly.
look at you rejecting woke culture. I mean, like so many, like Dave Rubin
I
and
don't know
stuff.
who would want to live under that kind of culture. I hate it. Just before I even knew what it was, that it was even wokeness, I hated people telling me how to talk and what pronouns I had to use and accusing me and my friends of being racist over stupid little. I hated all of it before I even knew it was called wokeness. I don't know who would like being treated that way or wants to live in
Yeah.
a society where that's how people are treated.
Well, they think, well, those people are evil. They deserve it. I'm not. But the thing is, they keep changing the rules.
Yeah, and they keep demonizing people as the rules change, and
The
that's just
line just keeps marching farther and farther and farther left. And it's like you're gonna be caught on the other side of the line eventually. Like you can't keep this up forever. Like you're gonna say something that's going to piss somebody off, even if it's like an accident and you didn't know that the rules were changed. They're
oh,
constantly just
you don't have to
changing the
say
rules.
anything. Once the identity groups change and there's a new oppressed and oppressor axis, then your identity that happened with the feminist and with that happened with the feminists when the black feminists came along, and then it happened when the trans came along and displaced them. So once your identity gets bumped off the bottom of the hierarchy, you're going to be cast in an oppressor role or displaced by a new it's that inverted pyramid,
Mhm,
that hierarchy of oppression. So you don't have to
mhm,
say the wrong thing. You just have to be the wrong identity group when the musical chairs change.
mhm. And I think eventually they're gonna push so hard that they're going to create the boogeyman that they're so afraid of that
Mm-hmm.
didn't exist in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
but will exist as a backlash to them.
This projective identification in psychology. That's one thing
Mhm,
psychology, I think, did get right.
mhm. Well, I have to wrap up. My browser is going to shut down in a few
Okay.
minutes.
It was a great
But
talk. I'm sorry
yeah,
it wasn't a debate, but I think we had an even more productive conversation than a debate might have been. So
I have hope for you. and I want to convert you to Christianity. So maybe next time
Well,
we'll
do
work
give
on
it
that.
your best. I'm quite happy with my little friend
I
over there, but
I'm encouraged that you get the warm fuzzies when you think about Jesus. So do you ever pray? Do you ever pray to? Have you ever tried like in your adult
I
life like praying to God?
not in my adult life. I used to pray when I was a kid, and I was scared of the devil when I was a kid. I was constantly praying
Me
to
too.
keep
Mhm.
not have the devil get me or take me to hell.
It was actually the Mormon missionaries that challenged me to pray that got me from being an atheist to being a Christian. And I didn't become a Mormon, but I do credit the Mormon missionaries. My husband was raised Mormon. Um, and I like them. I like them a lot, but I don't believe in Joseph Smith. But they kept coming around, and I like to talk about these things. And so I chatted with them and they just challenged me to pray to God and ask him if it's true. And I got an answer. So I challenge you to pray to
I
God
don't
and
even
ask
pray to
him.
Satan. So I did
Well,
pray
you
one
don't.
time in my life as an adult. I did. I was having a really bad mushroom trip, and it was really and I was on my bed with the covers over, praying to Jesus to make it go away. And Lord, I don't believe in you, but if you make this stop, I'll go to church tomorrow. I promise. Just anything to make the experience go away. And I did turn to praying to Jesus in that one moment of intense crisis.
Did it work?
Not really. The trip kept being awful.
Well, maybe not on mushrooms. You'll have a better experience.
Yeah. But I did enjoy the chat, and I'm glad you invited me on. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Did you
I
go to
bet it does.
church? No, because he didn't make the trip go away. So he didn't keep his end of the bargain. So I didn't feel obligated to keep mine. I did go.
Right.
My mom talked me into going to a Catholic church this year for Christmas. That was her Christmas gift, and I did go. And it was a beautiful. I hadn't been to a Catholic church in
I love Christmas.
decades, and it was a nice experience to be reminded of all of that.
Yeah.
So, and I had my satanic shirt on underneath. Being the
Oh,
little
don't
devil
bring
that I am.
Satan into it. But seriously, I do think that maybe if you can manage to find religion again and find
I
Christianity,
did find religion.
that find Christianity, that it might help you.
I'm pretty okay. I've been better than I have at any other point in my life. So
Mhm.
I'm pretty
I-
good. But I will keep what you said. I file everything away, so
mhm.
it's in there.
Okay. Well, it's good talking to you,
You too.
and you should keep me updated on your spiritual progress. I'll be praying for you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Do I just close out?